Number two is in the area of out-of-state contracts. The state of Minnesota contracts for a lot of business, as it should. It's almost $2 billion of state contracts where we contract with outside businesses. I'd like to see us make sure that Minnesota companies get preferential treatment for that, because if we're using our taxpayer dollars, it should be going to Minnesota businesses. And if there are state employees who are already paying that could do the job, we shouldn't have contracts for it, because now we're just paying employees to sit there and watch contracted people do the work. And as I said before, that's almost $2 billion of our state budget. We should review it, because I'd rather have a taxpayer dollar spent in Minnesota than in Delaware or Florida or Alabama or another state. Just makes sense to me. And the third place I would look at is kind of the middle management bureaucracy. And this happens with every governor that's been elected. You know, we had a governor from northern Minnesota, Rudy Perpich, who did this. Governor Plenty does it as well. And I'm not knocking them for doing it. I'm saying that it's about priorities now. And when we have to cut 1.2 or 5 or $8 billion, we should look at political appointees before we look at nurses or funding for our schools, and we should cut there first. And actually, under Governor Plenty, the number of political appointees rose in his time in office, rose from where they were at under Ventura. So this isn't a knock on the people who have those jobs. A lot of them are good people. They've been around in government or in elections for a long time. But I'm just saying, when we're gonna have to cut billions and billions of dollars, they should be the first to go before funding for schools and nursing homes and adults with developmental disabilities.
Will your proposal include a tax increase this year, do you believe? That's
hard to say right now. We're gonna start by trying to solve. I mean, we're going to take the governor at his word and others who have said that we can solve this with cuts alone. And I think it's a better way to do this, instead of first starting warring, saying, here's our most partisan ideas, here's your most partisan ideas, philosophically, let's have at it. Let's start the other way and say, where can we agree? Can we at least agree that more people can pick up a phone and do web conferencing and do out-of-state travel? That's a few $1 million. Let's start adding it up. Kurt's idea with the dairy idea from Wisconsin, let's throw that in the mix. A few $100,000, great. Let's add it up instead of being confrontational right away. And I'm going to walk in the governor's office with Kurt later today and propose that that's what we do. See how close we can get to 1.2. If we can get to 1.2, great, because the deficit's going to be much bigger next year, and any work we can do to cut the budget this year would be helpful.
Kurt, what would you like to see in the budget?
Well,
or not see?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I was watching the news lately too, and Representative Sertich had a press conference with some MAPE employees. Those are the public employees with the union, and one of the ways, and this was just for the 2010-2011 contract settlement, is $1.94 billion. It's a 2% increase in the public employees' wages. Now,
well,
when we're talking,
MAPE had a zero. They had a frozen increase, just so you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was zero.
What I'm saying was, as you've been laying off employees, we've been seeing government employees getting some significant increases. Not to say the work that they're not doing. I've been a public employee, both state and federal. I've also been a private sector employee. I went for 5 years at one of my jobs without a pay increase because it was tough economic times. And as far as the ability to find that, you know, it's it's kind of an easy deal to go after and say, well, we just have never liked Carol Molnow anyway. Let's go and kick her in the shins. Let's take Sherry Yecke. Let's take, and quite honestly, the reason it's Tony's fault. We had all these elections that we lost. We had people that needed jobs, and when I got there,
I'll agree with him there.
We had 82 members when I got there. We have 47. That's a lot of people out of work. But quite honestly, when we're talking about, and I'm not advocating that we start firing government employees, because that's one of the other political jabs that come into your back. I'm saying that if we're all going to be in this together, as you as business owners are having to ask your employees, and it's not the college kid that just started, it's not the new associate. These are people who built your businesses with you, started with you 10, 15, 20 years ago, that you're having to go and say, I'm sorry, I can't keep you on anymore, or I'm going to have to ask you to take a pay cut. And if it's 2 years, if it's 4 years, if it's 6 years, I don't think it's anything too much to ask of our state employees to be held at least flat. I would say, and there's a few of them that have come to me and said, thank you, just keep us flat. I don't want to be the one out there getting a $6,000 or $8,000 raise when my spouse is at home and just took a 20,000 or 20% hit in their pay and lost $20,000. It's that kind of, if it's a shared sacrifice that our my friends on the other side of the aisle talk about quite often, that shared sacrifice, where is it? If it were to have a settlement going into the future, and that future budget deficit that's been being kind of bandied about quite honestly a little bit too aggressively, that's if we go back to the spending levels of where we were. So that's like saying your sales for 06 were really great. Next year, I'm just going to assume that my sales for 06 are going to be back in 2010. Well, we're going to have to readjust the budget. One thing we heard about a lot last year, but haven't heard so much lately, is a zero-based budgeting. So you look at what you have coming in, you spend what you have coming in. The governor's got an idea for that for constitutional amendment. Again, there's 87 of them in the House, 47 of us. I don't think there's a good chance the governor's bill will pass, but each day hope springs eternal. But if it's a matter of where we're going to go in the future, we're going to have to look. This economy, this recession isn't going to bounce back like the past. The state economist has said the 3% and 4% growth that we had seen after past recessions is going to be maybe 1%. So we can't go back to the days of 2006 or 2008 spending levels and say, this is what we expect to spend, so we've got this huge deficit, we're going to have to figure it out. We're going to have to readjust back. We're back in 06 and 05 numbers. The budget has to go back there as well, because we can't come back to you and say, give us more money, go produce more, charge your customers more, because they don't have the money to pay either.
I want to ask a political question. I'm hoping for something other than a pat response.
Because we've given you a lot of those.
No, these have been, no, but this one I've asked before and I often get a pat response. So election years are always tough. They're always tough. There's always little political maneuvering going on. I think we have 5 or 6 individuals in the legislature running for governor. And everybody's up for re-election. And that changes the dynamics. It could, I'm interested, Kurt, in what you think. There was that stronghold of the House Republicans who really prevented that override of the GAMC, single line item veto, which I think really was difficult for people. Is that as strong? What happens when you have, the speaker who's running for governor? That's going to create some interesting dynamics. So can you speak a little bit about how this may be even more challenging? You want to start?
Oh, sure. Well, first and foremost, my name's Kurt Zellers. I'm not running for governor. Honestly, it'll probably mean Tony and I have to speak a lot less on the House floor, because we're going to have, besides Speaker Kelleher, Representative Thiessen is also running and chairs one of the big healthcare committees. So I think the dynamic is going to be, we've seen it before when Phil Krinke and Chuck Knobloch were running for, Chuck Knobloch, sorry. Boy, anybody that knows Jim Knobloch, that's a Freudian slip.
And Michelle Bachmann that year, too.
Yeah, and Congresswoman Bachmann. So we've seen it before. I think it's going to have a little bit of play in there, but quite honestly, if you thought that Tom Emmer and Marty Seifert were going to give floor speeches, any more or less floor speeches than last year, you'd be naive at the Capitol. But I think it'll maybe play a little bit in there. But since it's not a budget year, it's a bonding year, technically what we always could typify it as. I don't think it will be maybe that pronounced, but I do think from a standpoint of leadership styles, Marty Seifert, and thank him for doing it, because otherwise I wouldn't have this job. Marty resigned so that he wouldn't have to kind of balance, who are you helping, the caucus or the your gubernatorial campaign. So I actually appreciate that we don't have to deal with that, but I think it's going to be a lot of what we've seen in the past. I think they'll offer some different solutions. They'll probably have some more 5- and 8-point plans. Everybody's going to have 8-point plans and 5-point plans that they'll offer, but I think the philosophies and where they voted won't change any from last year.